Kate made this. I am Emily Kate and I'm coming to you from Berlin in Germany. Welcome to my knitting slash sewing slash crocheting podcast YouTube channel. Yes, crocheting, I did say that. A new craft has emerged. You'll also find knitting machine content and vintage knitting on here and whatever other chaos I get into. So let's get into it. Finished object slash what I'm wearing. Oh, this is my vintage 1940s 1480 Bestway jumper. It is part one of the project. It's going to be a twin set, I hope. And I have had an enormous amount of problems and struggles with this jumper, but alas, we have made it mostly. I'll try and put some footage here because it's not always easy for me to get my whole body in shot, but I'll stand up briefly and so you can see it, and then I'll insert some footage. Just chop my head off here. Ta-da! So let's get into it, into the nitty gritty. We've had moth disasters. We have had games of yarn chicken lost. We have had gauge problems. We have had steeking. Oh, what else have we had? Fit issues. Many troubles. But overall, I'm very happy with the end result. But I'm not going to pretend that there aren't some things that I would really have liked to have gone better. I discovered that I am insane. That definition of doing something over and over again and expecting a different result. I did that and I realised I've been doing this at least 4 times, and the problem is my memory, and it's kind of terrifying actually. I've been making vintage jumpers for a couple of years now and I keep making the same mistake on the sleeves of these jumpers, and every time I do the gauge, the measurements, and I was using Squidney's School of Vintage Knitting measurements when I started, and some of them work for me, some of them don't, and the arm part does not work for me. But I just keep going back to it thinking that's what I do and these are the measurements I do and then it will fit. And then I just forget and I make the same mistake where the sleeve doesn't go around the circumference of my arm. And I'm not saying it's Squidney's fault or her patterning is bad or anything. It's almost certainly me, but also I think I just have slightly different proportions than the average or normal person for my arms. But nonetheless, I have solved the issue. I just need to add 2 extra inches or 5 centimeters extra to my sleeves. But I just seem to forget this information every time. So I rip out my sleeves every single time I make a vintage pattern because my notes are so terrible and I lost all of them. And I don't know how because they all go in the same complete chaos system. That's probably why I lost them. I scribble notes, I scribble things out, I never write them out in neat, and then they just get shoved into the same place. And I think I need to sort that system out because then I might not have the same issues where I don't check my notes, because I realised the last 2 jumpers I had the exact same problem and then rewrote the notes and got the exact calculations I needed for this sleeve. So it would have saved me like 2 days of work and ripping things out. But alas, it happened. I hope verbalizing it and berating myself online will help me not do that again. I would also like to write out all of these measurements, all of the calculations, and print them. Then I could just go back to them. So if I've got 6 stitches in 2.5 centimeters, then I need to do this many stitches for this section or this section. If I have 7 stitches, I need to do this. Then that might help. But we'll see if I ever manage to do that. But please make me do that. Please tell me, Emily, you have to do that, otherwise you're going to keep making the same mistakes and be a fool. So that was one problem. The other, I feel kind of weird just listing out all these things that went wrong, because then people think I'm super negative about my knits, but I'm not. I love it, but it's a knitting channel where I'm talking about what the process and what happened, so I'm not actually berating myself. I don't hate on the jumper, I'm just explaining the things that went wrong. So I took the gauge for this jumper from a different project that I made, thinking because I used mostly the same wool, I used Rauma wool, that I would get the same gauge. I did sub in some other yarns. So this is the Rauma that I used, and it's the white one, 401, Rauma Finull, and it's 175 meters in 50 grams. And I subbed in some of this beautiful green, and this is 400 meters in 100 grams, so it's thinner than this one. This is Rauma. This is Tuku sock wool, fingering weight, and this is misc. I don't know what weight this is. This is the problem child of the whole project, because if you watch my last episode, you'll know I purchased this in a thrift store in Gotland in Sweden, and although I froze it, there was potentially damage before, hopefully before and not after, damage with moth eggs, and this was disintegrating as I was knitting it. So there was no ball band, I don't know the weight, I don't know the brand, it just looked like it was a very similar weight. But for some reason, despite them all being thinner than the main yarn and the one that I took my gauge from, and used the same needles and everything, this came out with less stitches. It came out at a bigger gauge. I keep forgetting that I'm pretty sure the pattern was 7.5 stitches and mine came out at 7. So then that threw off the entire gauge, and I had already knitted a good wodge of the colour work when I realised it had come out at 37 inches instead of 32. And what I should have done, and what I don't know that I'm going to do it even though I know I should, but what I should have done is knitted it to the pattern, flat, all the way. All of it should have been flat, but I didn't. My mum knitted the rib, and I chose the wrong needles, I chose the wrong stitch count, and I then knitted it in the round. I did the colour work in the round, saw that it came out too big, had lots of issues deciding what to do I do this, do I do that, ended up cutting out the extra fabric, but not enough. I only cut out this much, and I really feel like I cut out more, like I planned more than this. So I actually needed double the amount of fabric cut out, and I did not. So the jumper came out too big, it's too wide, and what I should have done if I was knitting it flat is to start at, let's say 100 stitches, then increase every 7th or 8th row until it made like this shape and got to the 32-inch bust. But I didn't, because I didn't want a really ugly, down the side here, I didn't want an ugly mismatched pattern. So I just cast on all the stitches. So let's pretend I cast on 120 stitches, which means the whole jumper is a box and does not have shaping. So I didn't get the ugly bad seams, but it didn't come out the shape that it really should have. And I should have just done that, because in the end I had to cut the fabric away anyway, and the seams don't match regardless. So also, if I had knitted it flat, I would have had even tension, because I knitted this whole top part flat, and this part is so much nicer. Not like, it's not drastic. No, I don't think anyone would particularly notice, but I just noticed that although I was scared of having this flat and it would all look weird and terrible, it actually looked really nice, and I could have just knitted the whole thing flat and it would have all looked nice, and I would have seen earlier that it was coming out too big and could have started again. I could also have had then gussets, because what this jumper really needs are some gussets, because then I could move my arms more freely without the whole jumper riding up. But alas, it is not knitted flat, so I cannot do that. Also, the gauge changed. So even though I did turn this into the correct size, it still changed even after blocking, which is kind of weird for this wool in my experience. It doesn't typically change when I have blocked it, but this did. So this is 14 inches across and I needed it to be 13 inches. So that's kind of annoying, because it has made it look like I've got a much wider chest. It does sit basically where it needs to be. It's just half an inch in here and half an inch in there. It would sit exactly where it needs to be. So I also messed up. This jumper is crazy how many mistakes I made. I was going with this pattern. It has a square neck. So I knitted it as a square neck, and I did the shoulder, whatever you call this, like the shoulder part, as per instructions. Then when I made my sleeves, I used my knitting machine to do the sleeves. I hand knit the ribbing and then I used my machine to do the sleeves. But the gauge was completely different on this section when I hand knitted it versus this. So the gauge went completely off. But I think this was 5 stitches and this is 7. So I ripped this out, knitted the sleeves, checked the gauge of the sleeves, and that was 6 stitches, and then I just re-knitted this section and this section on the machine so that they would match. But I did it using my normal neck measurements and everything, where it's basically for a round neck. So although I knitted it as a square neck, I then ripped it out, forgot it was a square neck, and knitted it like it's a round neck. So it doesn't quite look how it was supposed to, but I don't think it looks bad enough to rip it out. I did find that because I made everything just slightly too big, the front and the back were gaping at the neck like this. So I did a crochet reinforcement to bring the neck in, which unsurprisingly has made it a lot more difficult to get on and off. But it's not impossible, it's just, it was easy to get on and off. Now it's not quite as easy. So that was a bit of a disaster. And because I've made the jumper too big, the ribbing is also too big. Even though I took out, as you saw, I took out some, I need to take out like 3 of these, 3 times the amount that I did in order for this to sit like a vintage jumper. But I did spend an hour threading in elastic thread through it, and when I stood in front of the mirror, it was perfect, it looked great. Then I moved, and then the whole thing just shot up, and it ended up sitting like this. And I'd pull it down, and it would just go la 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 all day. So this morning I ripped out the elastic, and I'm just going to suck it up and have it with no elastic and just accept it is not the perfect fitting garment I had planned, but considering how much I messed up, I am so pleased with how it looks. It's not uncomfortable, it's just it could be more comfortable if I had gussets and if I had made this 1 inch smaller. I know that I could rip out the sleeves and like sew them in a bit further, but then you have all this bulk and then you have to cut that out, and at the moment it doesn't bother me enough to go through that whole ordeal, but in the future I might do that. Equally, I might change size and in the future and then this would fit, so who knows. I'm really happy because it's an all over colourwork jumper, vintage jumper that I have had on my list for so long, so I'm very pleased with it. I'm just a little bit sad that I made so many mistakes that were super unavoidable. But I wasn't to know that my gauge would do all the crazy things. I thought checking a gauge swatch, like using a jumper that's already made using the same wool, would be a much more accurate representation of my gauge than doing a small little square, because they've never worked for me in the past, so there's no reason they would work for me now. But yeah, obviously my gauge has changed since I made that jumper last year. And obviously I have got to write down my notes for the sleeves. I should have made the sleeves shorter. I did make them shorter, but then once I discovered that I needed, the problem I had was that I needed to add more stitches here before I did the bind off six, that left me with such a small amount of fabric that it just pulled this super wide, like way over here. So I had to rip back and add more rows to add more stitches, which then meant I added more rows, which made it longer. So it was supposed to end about here, which I would prefer, but equally, if you're going to wear a Norwegian wool short sleeve jumper, you probably want more coverage, like you want more warmth. My phone is making noises. Hang on, I'll put it on silent. I think also I don't love this colour next to my face, and I think this amount of white is not very flattering. I think potentially I should have used a different base colour, but I'm not quite sure what the problem is. If this is too warm or too cold in tone, what colour I should have purchased. But alas, this is what I had in my stash. This was technically a stash busting project because I had all of these. The blue was is my first ever mittens that I ever made, the wool leftovers. So that's from 2020. The pink I bought in 2020 to make a different pair of mittens. The white is left over from a different jumper, but I ended up not having enough of the white, so I had to buy more, which, yeah. The sleeves were supposed to be, like, let me rephrase that. It's a 1940s pattern, so it is supposed to have big sleeves, sleeve heads. but I originally planned to make them like a set-in sleeve without any excess, because it's a twin set, so I need a cardigan to fit on over top. But when I did that, I made the sleeve, the first version, despite the fact it didn't fit, I also thought that it looked really weird having this perfectly smooth sleeve head. So I then changed up my mind, changed my decision, and I did give them a little bit of a poof, which I think looks really nice. It's just I'm slightly concerned how the cardigan is going to fit over top, because that also has a poof. So I am nervous about this cardigan because, first of all, it has to fit over this one, and seeing as this is too wide, I'm concerned how the cardigan will fit, because I'm going to have to make the cardigan bigger in order to fit over all this fabric, like here and across here. And then will it just look too big if I'm not wearing it with this jumper? Will it look really weird with other things, or will it work? I am concerned. I haven't made a twin set before, and I've made not many cardigans, and I've never made a vintage cardigan. That's a lie. I have made 2 vintage cardigans to my memory, both with fit issues. The first cardigan I actually have plans to redo. It was the first vintage pattern, I think, that I talked about on this channel. And I made so many embarrassing mistakes. I am always embarrassed when I see that people have been watching that episode. I made so many mistakes with the sleeve head, and same story, different project, hey? But that cardigan is beautiful, but because I was so new to vintage knitting, I made so many mistakes. I chose like the worst wool for that project, and I don't wear it because I made this section minuscule, like the top, what is it, the armscye, I made about 4 inches or something ridiculous when mine's actually 8. So it doesn't fit. So I'm going to rip that cardigan out, and I'm going to make a new one, and I have the wool all ready to go. I have to start it. And I made a different cardigan using my knitting machine, and I put the gauge in the wrong set, the tension gauge thing in the wrong setting, and made other bits too small. But the overall jumper fits, and it actually goes quite well with this. But other than those 2, I haven't really made cardigans that in the vintage construction. I don't know how it's going to work, how it's going to fit, but we're going to give it a go and see how it goes, and really hope that it works, even if I end up not being able to wear the 2 at the same time because of the fit. Yes, I feel like I've just been complaining, but I don't personally feel like I am complaining. I'm just expressing what happened, but it feels like it came across as complaining. But I am happy. I just wish that I had some gussets and that I had made this 1 inch smaller and I hadn't messed up the shoulders. But the main thing is the shoulders are in the right place, which is something I have not always achieved. And although I did make it also about 1 inch too short, that I also need to fix for next time. Overall, I am pleased. I don't know what it is, but I constantly just forget all the vital information that I learn. Like, although I'm very short and I'm very small, my torso is quite long. So I actually need to add way more length to my clothing than I ever think that I should. I just think, oh, but I'm small, despite the measurements. I'm pretty certain when I measured this that it was what it needed to be, but I think because it stretched horizontally, it took out some of the length, because yeah, as I said, this should have been 13 and it's 14, and this just needs to be like 1 or 2 inches, 1.5 inches longer. So I think the fabric like changed shape in an unexpected way. But alas, it is done. I do love it. I think I might be more comfortable wearing it with a dress, because then it doesn't matter what the waistline is doing, and I could put a belt around it and basically modernize the fit of it, like the way I'm wearing it, because it doesn't quite look vintage because of the shape. I don't know. I did notice something last night that I think might be just playing on my mind a little bit. Typically, whenever I see vintage, like modern day people wearing vintage knits, they're making them really small, very like styled, and they look amazing. But then I compare like the fit of this and think, oh, that's too big, that's too wide, I've done this wrong. But if I actually look at people in the 1940s, like pictures of people wearing their knits, they aren't perfectly sculptured to their bodies. They do have looser ribbing, they do have excess fabric flowing over the ribbing, they do have shoulders that are bigger, or like, I want to say flopping down, but in a nice way. Like, I think I'm comparing my vintage knitwear to modern day knitters making it, whereas I should really be looking at real 1940s people, like photos of real 1940s people and how their clothing fit, because then it feels much more, it's a more realistic comparison, because they probably had like their jumpers given to them from their sisters or hand-me-downs, like more, it wasn't about perfectionism and getting things to fit you so perfectly. And also, their photos are usually taken when they're doing something, whereas nowadays we have Instagram where you can stand in a specific pose and everything looks like it fits amazingly, but in reality it doesn't. Don't know if I'm getting this point across. Basically, at the end of the day, this jumper is great, it fits quite nicely, and it's wearable, and I like it. And I should stop trying to compare what I make to other people and try and make it look like a modern fit. I'm not explaining myself, I'm going to give up. I know what I mean. So let us move on. We are moving on to a kind of a combination of, oh no, we're going to do this in a different way. I do have another finished object, but that is crochet, so I'm just going to stick with the knitting and then I'll do crochet afterwards. So I have a work in progress. This is a combination of vintage and modern. I have 2 projects attached to the same ball of yarn, so this is awkward. I am making a pair of socks alongside with my mum, and it is a vintage pattern that you will recognise, I'm sure. It is upside down to the original, so I'll hold it like that. It is the rainbow jumper pattern, which is also called bunny ears, but I often call the other stitch bunny ears, which is a colourwork jumper that I have. But this could be either. The rainbow jumper is what most people know it as, and I am knitting this along with my mum because she received these beautiful yarns. They're Kettu Knits yarns. You may know her as Finnish Knitting Stories. These are her amazing colours, and the Yarna vibes are strong. It makes me so happy when I look at this and think, Yarna. And we decided to split these yarns, and she's taken half and I've taken half, and we're hoping we can make 2 pairs of socks each by using the yarns like this. And It's really small and I made it to my normal stitch count. I usually do 56 stitches and it is stretchy, but for some reason it is tight, so it's definitely quite tight to get on. My mum did the same thing. She knitted hers, I think 60 stitches, and they did not go over her heel. She got about this far and then just tried it on. Didn't go on, so she had to rip it all back and start again. I've been teaching her, I say I've been teaching her by clicking on YouTube where somebody else is teaching how to do the shadow wrap heel. And then she's already finished one sock. I'm still behind because I was distracted with this jumper. But the rest of the sock will have this stitch. And it's so happy, and I love looking at them. They're like spring, Yarna and spring all combined, and it makes me very happy. So it is technically a modern pattern, but using a vintage stitch because I love the jumper that I made with this, and I have plans to make another one. So I'll give you more information about the colours and stuff later when I have got a bit further. That is my work in progress. I've been really just completely preoccupied making this jumper, and yeah, that's it actually. Just making this jumper, that has taken up all of my time. Now I have a new hobby, a new craft. I used to crochet when I when I moved to Berlin. I moved to Berlin and I could not learn German to save my life, and I thought I had some brain problem. I know, a bit dramatic, but I thought I must have some brain injury and that's why I can't learn. So I decided to teach myself crochet to make sure that I could learn new information. And I learned to crochet, but I only made like little toys and aragurumi kind of things. And then when I learned to knit, I just gave up on crochet entirely and never ever touched it again. And recently I've started getting the urge to learn to crochet again, but it wasn't until my mum said she wanted to learn to make granny squares that it really resurged this desire to learn crochet again. So when she was here, we gave it a go. She was very occupied with her sock, so we just decided to put that aside and come back to it later. But when she went home, I thought I'll just give it a go, see if I can do it. And I used a few YouTubes and I did it, and it's so fun and I'm so happy. It's like it's opened up this door to new creative plans, and I feel like now I can do a granny square, I can do anything. Like any crochet project, I'm like, yeah, I could totally do that. Even though I've only done, what, 2 stitches. I know that in the past I have done more crochet stitches, I just don't remember any of them, but they'll come back. So I made a crochet granny square and turned it into a cushion. And I'm even more excited because I'm finally using some yarn that I have had in my stash for longer than I have known how to knit or crochet. A friend of mine in New Zealand, she sent me some yarn. Yeah, well, she kind of did. She sent it via a friend from America who sent it to me. And that was back in 2017, I think. And it came with a book on how to crochet and these yarns. And then I learned to crochet in 2018, I think. I can't remember. But basically I had the yarn before I could craft, and I just didn't know how to use it because it's bulky yarn, and the crochet projects in the book were for cotton and fingering weight cotton, and I had absolutely no understanding of yarn, gauges, what hook, anything. I made so many errors because I just didn't understand anything. And I didn't know about crochet podcasts or knitting podcasts or anything. And I didn't really know anyone that could crochet or knit, so hence the reason I made so many mistakes. But I've had this yarn in my stash ever since, so a good long while. And I got about 20 of these. There is usually another one. They come in 4. I don't even know what you'd call them. They're kind of skeins, but half skeins. And they are from Yarnspirations, and they're Caron Pantone. Pantone? The paint company. Paint thing. It's not a paint company. Oh, it doesn't matter. I got these, and I remember thinking these are like very special yarns and I can only use them for a special project. And it wasn't until I was crocheting this week that I realised that they are mostly acrylic and nylon with 20% wool. But nonetheless, they're still special to me because I got them from a friend and they just arrived in this box, and it was so amazing to open this box with all of this wool and all the potential for my future craftings ahead of me. So they come in these, and I have 2 of each. So I took those colours and made this because I thought if I mixed, and I was going to make a blanket, this pattern's for a blanket. I thought all these colours, I've got bright green and bright orange and black, and I thought I don't really want a blanket with black and orange. So I stuck with the cushion, but I didn't have enough for the back. So when I wanted to learn to crochet way back when, I saw this jumper on Lovecrafts, and I still have it saved. I've never made it, but I wanted to make this jumper so badly, and I saw that the yarn that was recommended was this one, but I don't remember the brand. It's Katia, but I can't remember what yarn it is. It's like a bulky wool and acrylic mix, and I remember buying one ball thinking, oh my goodness, that is so expensive, I can't buy a whole jumper's quantity and I don't know how to crochet. So I bought one ball. Unsurprising to you all, that ball has sat in my stash for the last 8 years, because what do you do with one ball of bulky yarn when you don't knit with bulky wools? But I can answer that now. You use your knitting machine and you knit it all up into the back of a cushion cover. I don't actually care that it doesn't close, because I could just put a button there if I wanted to, but I don't care. So it covers it, that's the main thing. It's out of my stash. This yarn is out of my stash, and these are the 2 oldest yarns that I have. When I say it is the oldest yarn, I mean the collection that I got, plus that yarn. So that's one granny kind of square, expanded granny square, and because I have so much of that wool, I have more granny squares. Oh, I'm so happy. So I think I've got 8 at the moment. I need one more. Is it 8? There's either 9 or 8. I need one more for the front of a cushion, and then I've got 9 more to make, and they'll be completely different colours, the ones I just showed you. And I've got these. So this will be the front and that'll be the back. So I'll have 2 granny square cushions, and I am so excited. I have planned so many granny square projects. I have this image of just my entire apartment being covered in granny squares now. Like everything. I want to cover everything in granny squares. Okay, I'm going to take a little break, charge my camera, charge myself, and I will come back to you with some more chat. I am back. Just had a little break, little smoothie, little cup of tea. Now I'm back. I don't have much more to talk about, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. It was my birthday on March 6th. I mentioned that in my last YouTube, so thank you for your happy birthday wishes over there and on Instagram. I had a wonderful birthday. My mum came to visit. She bought me lovely things and we had a marvellous time. We did some baking, some knitting, attempted crocheting, and overall the weather was splendid, so we had a great time outside in March. It's unheard of. I was wearing a dress with no sleeves, no cardigan in March. We had a little scone and tea session on the balcony. It was very nice. Anywho, my mum went halvesies with another family member and she purchased me this very exciting present. It is called a Speeddarner and it is handmade in Cornwall in England, and it's based off of the original 1940s darning loom. Not gonna lie, it's very expensive, hence why my mum went halvesies, but I am so appreciative because if you've watched for a while, you'll know I purchased one that I knew it wasn't great quality, but I couldn't find any that were worth the money because everyone was selling these darners with the exact same stock photo but for different prices, and they all just came from China. And I eventually caved, bought one, I think on Amazon. It arrived, it was such terrible quality and I cut myself using it because the metal is just so sharp and the elastic band snapped and the whole thing fell apart and went and I thought, it is not worth it. I do not want to do this to myself. And then I saw this company and they make them by hand. They're really, really good quality. And I have so many projects that I want to mend. I know it's possible to do this kind of mending without one of these looms, but I have done that for several years and it's just not easy. Feels like the wrong word. I don't feel like I'm doing a very good job, and the angle at which I have to hold my hands and try and shove various things inside it to keep the fabric in place, and there's a reason that these have been invented and I found them really great. And one of the things I used the other one for was to mend my husband's slippers. Now, this is using the old loom that broke and it wasn't very easy to get it to stay on the fabric, and I am really excited to give this new one a go. I haven't tried it yet, but as you can see, my husband has made me a lovely test spot to test out my new toy. He's got another hole up here and here, and I think there's another one forming up here. At some point, I do just need to figure out how to just redo the sole. And I'm going to put a question to you. I have looked and failed to find vintage, I mean, it could be modern, but I'm just going to say vintage, flat knitted versions of these kind of Scandinavian slippers. Do you know of a pattern that uses sport weight maximum DK weight yarn so that I could try making these on my knitting machine? Because although I love these slippers and I love how they fit on for him and for me, the process of making them is not fun for me, and I have to use thicker wool. This is a 200 meters per 100 gram weight wool, which is really hard on my hands, the needles, everything. The whole process is just not fun for me, and I thought it would be great if I could make these on my machine. That would free up my hands to do other fun things like crocheting and colour work on a jumper or Basically anything other than knitting on thicker needles with thick yarn in the round. I don't even mind trying to knit this by hand flat. I just don't want it in the round, I want it flat. And I don't know, I can't find a pattern. I've only found machine knit patterns for in the round, because some knitting machines can do that. Mine is a vintage machine and can only do flat. I don't mind having to seam, I don't mind having to like add extra I-cords and stuff later, but basically I just want the basic shape that I could knit flat. I am wondering if I just measured this and saw, say my gauge was 6 stitches in 2.5 centimeters, and I measured how many stitches I would need and did the same here. I know how to do a short row heel on the machine. It just, something about it, maybe this section is throwing me a little bit. But if you have any thoughts, please let me know, because he loves these and he loves them and he wears them, and it's basically the only thing that he actually really enjoys wearing that I made him. Because the hat I made him, it's alright, the gloves, they're alright, the jumper he does like, but the socks, he could take them or leave them really, but the slippers, he loves them. So if I can make something every year, every 2 years that I can mend and keep going, and if he could have even like 3 pairs so he didn't put all the weight of the world onto the one pair every day, that would be great. So until I have figured that out, I'm going to use my new toy. My mum also brought over some socks that I made her that have got a hole, and I have a couple of projects that have a hole, so I've got lots of mending ahead of me. I do really enjoy taking care of the things that I make, so having some little tools with me to aid the pain of mending everything feels very good. I know that I wanted to talk about other things, but my brain is switching off, so I think I'll just end it here, and if anything else comes to me, I'll add some extra footage later, but I don't think it will. I would like to get this episode up, and then I can start knitting on my socks, because I'm behind, I'm very behind. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!